Yo, what's going on, Jungle Cats? Got us here coming at you with a new video. The Mythical Island mini set is finally releasing in just a couple hours, and we're going to go through everything you need to know for it and some decks that you can try out right off the bat. Alright, so the main purpose of this video is going to be focusing on the new cards and some decks that you can use once the mini set comes out in a few hours. I do want to just kind of go through everything that we know about the event so far and the new mini set coming out, but I know that that's been covered a lot, so if you are just here for the decks, you can skip to the time code, and if you want to get a recap on everything, follow along right here. Before we jump into all of that, just remember to like, comment, and subscribe. We also have an announcement at the end of the video, so stay tuned till then. So let's get started and talk about what we know so far about the event. And I wanted to walk through a couple other things as well. We're looking right now at ptcgpocket.gg. It's kind of where I get most of my information on Pokemon Pocket events and everything that's going on. I do look at other sources as well, but I'll link this down in the description if you also want to look. Something to remember to do is to pick up your holiday hourglasses. These should be hitting your inboxes. I believe they'll be in the gift section of your inbox for the next couple of days. Another thing that you want to do, if you don't have a lot of cards, you're trying to get more hourglasses, it's always a good idea to do solo battles and do all the solo battle challenges. If you still haven't done the original solo battles, I recommend doing those to get more hourglasses and help build up your collection a little bit more if you don't have any cards in the decks that we're looking at. But yeah, there should be some new solo battles coming. Right now, there's at least 4, but this says expert battle as well. So what we can expect is that there'll be different levels like we saw in the original solo battles. So something else I wanted to just address, because we haven't seen a new pack yet, is that we'll need to kind of adjust how we're opening packs. If you go into your packs, in a couple hours, you should be able to go into select other booster packs and see Mythical Island here. Another thing that's been confirmed is that all the pack points from Genetic Apex will not carry over to Mythical Island and vice versa. So if you have pack points and you're planning on spending them on Mythical Island, you won't be able to do that. Also, so just something to note, the hourglass for the holiday event should be popping up in your gift section right here. Those should be popping up in the next couple of days. So jumping into the cards, there's kind of 10 cards that I feel are standing out to me from the ones that we've seen so far. So we're going to look at 10 cards, and then we're going to look at 10 different decks. I'm mostly going to talk about the specifics of the cards in this section right here, and the deck section is going to be pretty quick. Maybe just recapping some of the things that we go over in this section. But yeah, the first card that we're looking at is kind of the spotlight of this mini set. It's the Mew EX, and this card is honestly looking to be the strongest out of the cards that we've seen so far. Mew EX is looking strong for a couple of different reasons. The first is that it's a basic Pokemon that's an EX Pokemon, and we've seen with Pikachu EX that that's a very strong characteristic to have. Just throwing out an EX Pokemon without having to evolve it or anything is super beneficial. And on top of that, Mew is coming with a Psy-Shot attack, which does 20 damage, and Genome Hacking attack, which allows you to choose one of your opponent's enemy's Pokemon's attack and use this attack. You take attacks like Crimson Storm from Charizard or Mewtwo's attack and use it against them at 1 less energy. Now there is a similar card to Ditto that's already in the game, but with Ditto you need the exact energy that the opponent is using for their attack. With this, you can have any energy on the Mew and it will do the attack. So it's essentially a better version of the Ditto. Also, this has 130 HP and only 1 cost for retreat. Those are just great stat lines, especially for an EX Pokemon that you can throw in right away on turn 1. I think all of the stats together are going to be super helpful and allow this card to be a great way to counter other EX Pokemon. What you'll see in some of the decks I've made is that Mew is not in the Psychic deck, and it's kind of capitalizing on this ability to use any energy. So definitely a super strong ability. It's going to be a card you can throw in just about any deck, I'd say. You'll just be kind of missing out on having that side shot if it's not in the Psychic deck. But honestly, we've seen kind of like a similar playstyle with like Weezing, where people don't use Weezing's attack, they're just using his ability. I know that the genome hacking is an attack as well, but it's just kind of a similar idea where you're not playing this card in this specific energy group that it's made for. So the next Pokemon we're going to be looking at is Aerodactyl EX, which is super exciting. And Aerodactyl has the ability Primeval Law, which states your opponent can't play any Pokemon from their hand to evolve their active Pokemon. And this card, people kind of like choose a side on. Some people are thinking that's not going to be good. Some people think it's going to be bad. For me, I see most cards with abilities as a good thing, because you don't have to play them out front. But yeah, I think this ability is super good, and I think it will actually work really well with cards like Victory Bell, who can pull their basic Pokemon up front. I think it will also work well with Pidgeot, who can move their cards around with its ability. And I think that's going to work especially well with the new item card that we're seeing come out, which I'll talk about in a little bit, which is the Poke Flute. If you can bring their Pokemon forward, make sure they don't evolve them, take them out, and then bring them back with a Poke Flute, it just creates like a winning cycle. And yeah, having the 80 damage on there as well is great. 80 damage is like a pretty high damage for only 2 energy. And it has 140 health as well, which is always good. And only a 1 cost retreat. So overall, I think this is going to be a pretty strong card. It's definitely going to be a little bit niche in how you play it. You're going to have to be a little bit precautious. And I wouldn't really suggest throwing this in right away, especially if they're running like a deck like Pika. So the next card we're looking at is the full art Vaporeon, and to me this is like my favorite art that's been in the game so far. This is just so beautiful. I was looking for the artist Aspara and I couldn't find them anywhere, so if you have seen them anywhere, you know where to find them, definitely drop a comment below. I'd love to like follow them. But yeah, besides that, this kind of goes along the same line that I was talking about with Aerodactyl, where you have a really good ability. The attack isn't super strong with this one. This kind of matches the other Vaporeon that we saw, but with the subtraction of healing from the attack, which is kind of bad. I think the ability that allows you to move water energy from bench Pokemon to your active Pokemon is going to be super helpful, and it's going to pair really well with Starmie EX, who has a 0 cost retreat. So you can throw Starmie in, start doing damage, and then if you get in a bad situation, pull it out and put that energy onto a more powerful Pokemon, maybe like a Blastoise, a Gyarados, or, I mean, a Gyarados might be a little bit of a cope, but, or a Lapras, that can take a little bit more damage. So yeah, I'm excited about this. This is going to be a pretty flexible card. It's going to allow you to move around your cards a little bit more. I really like cards like that, and I think it's going to be super powerful. All right, the next card we're looking at also, I would say, has S tier art. This is Dedenne, and their ability with their attack is flip a coin. If heads, your opponent's active Pokemon is now paralyzed. So a lot of people have been comparing this to the promo Jigglypuff, and yeah, I would totally agree with that. I think it fits that with a better stat line. You're doing 10 damage on the Pokemon. This just seems like such a good replacement for that, for Pincurchin, just a lot of stall cards in a lot of decks. I think this is going to work super well in Dragonite, and I have a deck. If you like to play Dragonite, you can try that out. But yeah, overall, just super solid card. 1 cost retreat, you're stalling, you're doing damage, you're doing everything you need, and yeah. So there's a couple cards that had higher quality versions of Japanese. I just translated them, so the text might not be exactly what we see in the release later. But yeah, here's Marshadow. I think Marshadow is going to be one of the stronger cards in the set. Marshadow's ability reads, if your Pokemon was knocked out by damage from a move of your opponents during the previous turn, deal an additional 60 damage. To me, this is a crazy stat line, and you're already doing 100 damage when you go up against decks like Pikachu, which has been dominant in the meta, you're going to be doing 120 damage on electric type Pokemon, which is just insane. That's going to be able to one-shot a Pikachu EX, so definitely a direct counter to PK EX, which we need for sure. There's a lot of decks that I made in here that are going to be making use of Marshadow. I think it's super strong, just has like a back line, and I know it is 80 HP, but sometimes you just need to get some damage down, take out an EX Pokemon, and you don't mind losing a point. So it's gonna be a different kind of play style. You're probably gonna want to get them in after you lose your first Pokemon, and hopefully that first Pokemon isn't an EX Pokemon. Get you quick 2 points on a PKEX or something like that. Speaking of PKEX, there's a new Pikachu coming out. We've already had a lot of Pikachus, but this is kind of one with a new ability that's kind of mimicking the ability that we've seen with PKEX. So this Pikachu does 10 damage for each number of bench Pokemon. I'm not sure if that's supposed to be electric or just any bench Pokemon, but essentially it's like a mini Pikachu EX. Could do up to 30 damage, which is great. The Pikachus right now seem like they fall flat a little bit, so this is going to be good leading into that Raichu if you are playing a Lieutenant Surge deck or something along those lines. So I think it's just like a slightly better version of this Pikachus. Definitely something I'm going to be playing. I prefer to play Lieutenant Surge, so I think it'll do well in that deck. Alright, so the next card's Tauros, and I've heard some people like him. I heard some people that don't think he's going to be that good. I personally think he's going to be strong. I think you're just going to need to build the right deck for him. But his ability is, if your opponent's active Pokemon is an EX, this attack does 80 more damage. So essentially, this Tauros is an EX hunter, which we kind of love. I mean, EX has been dominating the meta, so we really need a card that can stand strong against them. So you're gonna need to pair him with Pokemon that don't require a lot of energy. So something that can maybe build up and only need 1 or 2 energy. I think like a good card that will be in one of my decks with Tauros is Beedrill. You can put your 1 energy on Beedrill, and then you can start building up your Tauros in the background for when they have their Pokemon EX ready. But yeah, I think he's going to be pretty strong. I think he's going to be a good counter that you can put in any deck, especially if we are seeing a lot of EX Pokemon decks in the meta. And the last couple cards we're going to be looking at are supporter and item cards. We're not exactly sure how we're going to be obtaining these. What we can assume is that the supporter cards are going to be inside the pack, so you have to pull them from the pack, and the item cards are going to be how we've seen them in the past, so you're going to be using the shop tickets to unlock them. That might not be the case. We do have Professor Research that's also in the shop, so it could be a possibility that we see these supporters in the shop as well. I would say more likely than not, though, we'll be pulling these out of the packs. But yeah, the first supporter card we're going to be looking at is blue, and I would say this is probably the fan favorite of the cards we've seen so far. What blue does is during your opponent's next turn, all of your Pokemon take -10 damage from attacks from your opponent's Pokemon. And yeah, this is basically a direct counter to Giovanni. Giovanni's a card that's played in, I would say, 90% out of decks and can really give people the edge on taking out your Pokemon, either getting a point early or getting that point they need at the end of the game. So having a defense against that is super helpful. I think people are going to start pivoting towards swapping out of their Giovannis for this. Curious where this ends up in the meta after a couple weeks. I think it might replace Giovanni, but we'll have to see. I think the timing with playing this card is a little bit trickier than Giovanni. You're just gonna have to be aware of how much damage your enemy's Pokemon do and if they might use a Giovanni or anything like that. So yeah, I feel like there's gonna be a little bit more of a skill cap with this and learning it, but overall I think it's gonna be a little bit better than Giovanni once people get a hang how to use it and when to use it. So the next supporter card we're gonna be looking at is Leaf. And I'm really interested in this card because it's going to change how we look at a lot of cards in the Genetic Apex. There's a few cards like Kangaskhan, Snorlax, Onix, Golem that need a lot of energy to retreat. And when you have a card like Leaf, you're going to be able to play them a little bit different. I think this is going to work the best with Kangaskhan, just because typically you don't really like to put your extra energy on Kangaskhan. and having a support card that can pull Kangaskhan out and not lose you that early game point is going to be super helpful. So we've seen Kangaskhan in a lot of decks just like kind of thrown in. I think that Leaf is going to pair well. You won't need to use your X speeds with it anymore. So another thing people are kind of talking about is that this is replacing X speed, but I think it's important to note that this is a support card and it's taking away your ability to use any other support cards that turn. So X speed still is going to be beneficial, or beneficial in other situations. So you can use an item and a support card. So yeah, just something to keep in mind when you're building your decks. If your cards are relying on retreating a lot, you're looking to like move your cards around a lot in your deck, you might want to run Leaf and X speed. There's going to be kind of a balance you need to figure out with your decks, just to keep in mind that this is supporter card. And yeah. And the last card that we're going to be looking at is the Flute. But what this does is it chooses one basic Pokemon from your opponent's trash and put it onto their bench. To me, this draws two cards to mind right away. The first is Victory Bell, because you can pull up a basic Pokemon that you just took out with Victory Bell, and then you can bring it back to the front lines. You can just kind of keep cycling this, which I think is going to be crazy. Another Pokemon I think that this will work with well is Dragonite, just because you could take out their Pokemon with your first Dragonite hit, and then they might not have that many other Pokemon on the board, but if you use this, then you're going to be able to bring that basic Pokemon back and do another attack on it with Dragonite. There's some other cards I think are going to work well with this too, but those are kind of the top two that jump out at me. So yeah, now we've kind of looked at the cards. We're going to just go through the decks. We obviously haven't seen all the cards that are going to be released. They did a pretty good job of restricting what cards have been shown. There are a few other cards that were mentioned, but I don't think they're super game-changing or anything along those lines. There's also a couple other cards that we haven't seen any art for. We don't know the specific for their attacks, but we know they're coming, like Celebi EX, Pidgeot EX, and we could assume things like Servine or Superior are probably coming as well too. But yeah, let's jump into those decks. All right, so this section of the video is going to be pretty quick. I'm just going to kind of recap some little information with each deck. But yeah, the deck codes are going to be below. The website that I use doesn't have all of the art. So yeah, if you click on the link, you might not see the card art there, but they should have the information for the card that we know so far. In this section of the video, we're going to look at EX specific decks. I'm going to have a section later where we look at decks with non-EX Pokemon. So these are all going to be featuring the new cards, but if you don't have a full collection yet and you're missing some EX Pokemon, you can look later in the video and maybe find a deck that you have the cards for. But yeah, the first deck that we're going to be looking at is EX Killer deck, and this deck is focused on taking out EX Pokemon. In this deck, we're working with Mew EX, who's going to be copying the EX Pokemon's move, and then Tauros EX, who's going to be putting the damage on those Pokemon. We also have Pidgeot in this deck, so you can shift around the Pokemon that are in the front. If you want to put in their EX Pokemon and do damage on it with Tauros, you can do that. Or if you want another Pokemon to be out front and you want to take it out, then you can do that as well. We're also utilizing Sabrina in this deck, so you can really shift around their cards. The next deck we're looking at is with Vaporeon, and this is using that combo that I talked about earlier with Vaporeon and Starmie. So the whole point of this deck is to have a super flexible water energy type deck. So you're really making use of Vaporeon's ability, having the water move around. Starmie, I think, works really well with this because you can retreat Starmie and move all that energy to the Lapras and then just start putting down a ton of damage with your Lapras. We also have Misty in here, so you can start building up your energy and transfer that to the Pokemon you need. Overall, it's just a very flexible and quick moving deck. The next deck we're going to be looking at is an Aerodactyl EX deck, and this is using the combo I talked about earlier with Victory Bell and Aerodactyl. So you're using Victory Bell to bring their basic Pokemon up front, and then they won't be able to evolve them from there. Then you can take out that Pokemon and then use your Flute to revive that Pokemon and then bring it back up front. It's kind of a cycle of picking out their basic Pokemon and bringing it back and using that to your benefit. You also have Aerodactyl, which you can build up in the background, come in and quickly do 80 damage if your Victory Bell gets taken out. So I don't think I could go by without having a Mewtwo deck. I think this is going to be one of the strongest decks in the game for a while with Mew in there. Just the fact that you can add energy on Mew with Gardevoir, but you don't even need that. You're going to be able to probably have your Mewtwo primed and ready right off the bat. It's just going to be so crazy. This deck's going to be able to counter a lot with Mew's ability. This Mew is going to be essentially taking over the spot of the baby Mewtwo that was previously in this deck, and you can easily retreat it out. It's going to be able to tank a hit from Pikachu and a lot of other decks. So I think it's just going to be a super strong deck in the meta. The last EX deck that we're going to be looking at is something that has been super popular in the meta, and it's a Wigglytuff Arbok deck. Now we're incorporating Mew into it. So this Mew combo is making the deck even stronger, just giving us another way to defend against EX Pokemon, since sometimes this deck can be taken out by them, but Mew is going to be stepping in and defending against Mewtwo decks and Charizard decks in case you don't get that Wigglytuff out quick enough. Alright, so now we're going to be looking at some non-EX decks. And actually, I think a few of these are going to be pretty competitive and pretty strong. I think because of the few cards that we've seen, these are going to hold up in the meta and be able to beat EX decks. The first one, this is also an EX killer deck. It's focused on an EX. So in this deck, we're utilizing the Tauros, which is targeting those EX. We also have Beedrill. So this is kind of that combination I was talking about earlier, where you only need to put one energy on Beedrill, and then you can build up your Tauros in the background. We also have Kangaskhan in here. So if you don't hit your Beedrill line right away, you can put Kangaskhan in. And yeah, another card that we're also utilizing here is Leaf. The Kangaskhan and Tauros have high retreat costs, so Leaf is going to be super helpful to get those out if you need to get them. I think this deck is going to be super strong against EX decks and be able to take them out before they can really build up their Pokemon. The next deck is kind of similar to our Aerodactyl Victory Bell deck, but this is utilizing Tauros instead of Aerodactyl. And I'm not actually sure this could potentially be stronger, just because you have Victory Bell focusing on their basic Pokemon, and then you can have Tauros as a backup to focus on their EX Pokemon. Also, I totally forgot to mention this in the other deck just because I can't see the art in my deck builder, but we have Marshadow in these decks, and Marshadow is kind of like a bit of a buffer when and if our Victory Bell gets taken out. So after it gets taken out, you can throw Marshadow in and do some heavy damage on their Pokemon. Hopefully it will take it out. Hopefully your Victory Bell has already done damage on that, especially if it's like an EX Pokemon. But I think this will be a great use for Marshadow and quickly dropping like 100 damage on their Pokemon. This next deck is making use of the new Dedenne and the new Pikachu. So with this deck, you're going to be hopefully trying to stall out front and building up your Raichu in the background. You can also build up Electrode. If you hit your Pikachu early, you can fill up all your lanes and start putting down damage. But the main goal is to slowly peck away at them, maybe get 1 point in, and then have your Raichu come in, take out their big opponent later in the game. Maybe it's an EX. I think it's going to be a great use of the stalling and a great use of the new Pikachu. Our next deck, I talked about a little bit earlier when I was talking about Dedenne, but this is our Dragonite Dedenne deck. So yeah, you're basically trying to stall out at the start of the game, and then once you finally have Dragonite built up, then you're going to just start laying down your attacks. If you take out one of their basic Pokemon, you can bring it back with the Flute. Say you take out one of their basic Pokemon that has just like a little bit of health, and then the rest of their Pokemon have like a lot of health. You might want to use the Flute to bring back that basic Pokemon and get an extra point in on your next attack. And the last deck we're looking at is an Arbok Pidgeot deck, but in this we're utilizing Tauros as well. This deck is really about controlling where your opponent's Pokemon are, so you can focus on their basic Pokemon at the start, and then once you have your Tauros built up, you can maneuver in their EX Pokemon and start laying down some damage on it. This deck, you're really trying to control where their Pokemon are. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope that you can pick up a lot of these cards so you can make some of these decks. We're going to be live streaming tonight for the release of the cards and opening as many packs as we can, so hopefully we get a full set, but who knows? We'll see how good our luck is. I've got a lot planned in the upcoming weeks, so stay tuned. We're going to have our pack opening video tomorrow, and then hopefully we're going to have some more deck videos later in the week. We also have a giveaway going on right now with Poke TCG giveaways. So if you don't have enough money for gold, we're giving away 2 $20 bundles and 2 $10 bundles, and hopefully you'll get a chance at winning that. Check the link down in the description. But yeah, Hope you enjoyed, and catch you next time. Deuces.